My name is Stella. This happened when I was 25, right around the time the COVID-19 pandemic first hit. Money was tight back then because of the tough economy, so I started buying wholesale liquidation pallets to flip for a profit. Each pallet was completely random, so you never really knew what was inside. On one occasion, I bought a pallet that mostly contained swimsuits, underwear, and socks for women and young girls. I listed the items individually, but I also posted an option to sell the entire lot to anyone who wanted it. Just a few minutes after posting the listing, I received a message from a middle-aged woman. Her profile picture showed a pleasant-looking lady in her late 50s or early 60s. She told me she wanted to buy the whole batch as a gift for her daughter and granddaughters who lived out of town. The conversation felt completely normal, and we agreed to meet the next day at a public parking lot to do the swap. On the day of the meetup, right as I was getting ready to leave, I suddenly received a message from a completely different account asking to push the time back by 30 minutes. This person explained that her old account had suddenly been locked, so she had to use a backup profile to contact me. Even though I felt a little uneasy about it, I brushed it off because I really wanted to make the sale. However, the deal started getting sketchier by the minute. The person kept changing the meeting spot. I refused and insisted that we stick to the original public location. Finally, the person offered to pay me an extra $100 if I would just deliver the items directly to their house. At that point, all I could focus on was the extra cash, so I agreed. The person set the time for around 5:30 p.m. and texted me the address. When I looked up the location on GPS, I hesitated for a moment. The destination was deep in a heavily wooded area, far away from any major residential neighborhoods. A wave of anxiety washed over me, but I told myself that people must still live out there, so I didn't think much more of it. By late afternoon, I was driving down the route provided by the map. The deeper I went, the more desolate the surroundings became. Since it was winter, the sun was setting very early. The moment I arrived at the address, my sense of dread spiked completely. The area was almost entirely isolated. There were only a few old, run-down houses scattered far apart from one another. My cell phone service dropped to a weak, flickering signal, and the road leading in was completely dead and empty. In the fading twilight, the whole place looked like it had been abandoned ages ago. Standing out there in the middle of nowhere, I finally realized I had made a massive mistake. I had come to this place completely alone, and I hadn't told a single soul where I was going. Fear kept me pinned to my seat. I stayed inside the car, cracked the window just a tiny bit, and called out loudly to see if anyone was coming to get the packages. After a moment, the front door of the house creaked open. Someone was standing right behind the door, but they wouldn't step outside. Their entire body was swallowed by the darkness of the house. Only a voice echoed out, asking if I could carry the heavy boxes inside for them. My survival instincts were screaming at me that if I crossed that threshold, I might never come back out. I immediately said no. The person inside stood perfectly still for a few seconds. Seeing my stubborn refusal, the person finally decided to step outside. And that was when I laid eyes on one of the most terrifying people I have ever met. I know it's wrong to judge someone based entirely on their looks, but this man genuinely made my skin crawl. He stood nearly 7 feet tall and was unnaturally incredibly gaunt. His face was completely hollowed out, and his hair was chopped in a jagged, messy way. Some sections were long and stringy, while other parts looked almost completely bald. His entire look and vibe instantly reminded me of a serial killer straight out of a horror movie. He slowly started walking toward my car. As I watched him approach, it suddenly hit me what I was actually selling: underwear, swimsuits, and socks meant for women and little girls. The panic hit me even harder. I couldn't think of a single normal reason why a man like him would want to buy those specific items. Horrifying thoughts started racing through my mind about the sick fetishes he might be hiding, or worse, even darker possibilities. When he reached the car, he asked me one more time to help him carry the boxes inside the house. There was absolutely no way I was going to do that. I quickly lied and told him that I had to get to my night shift right away and that my boyfriend was already waiting for me at my workplace. I added that if I was even a few minutes late, he would definitely start calling around to find me. I saw the muscles in the man's face twitch violently. He turned his head to look back down the empty dirt trail leading out of the woods, as if he were weighing his options. A few seconds later, a look of pure irritation washed over his face. Without saying another word, he yanked the heavy boxes out of my trunk himself, tossed a wad of cash through my cracked window, turned around, and walked straight back into the house. I slammed the window shut, hit the gas, and tore out of that place as fast as my car could go. It wasn't until I cleared the wooded area and my phone finally got a signal back that I felt like I could breathe normally again. On my way home, I pulled over and chatted with a local resident from that area to ask about the man. The resident told me that he was a notorious eccentric in the community. Everyone knew he had severe mental issues and exhibited highly erratic behavior. Even though he had never been convicted of a serious crime, most of the locals stayed far away from him because he felt incredibly dangerous. To this day, every time I look back on that night, I still believe I was a hair's breadth away from a situation turning horribly wrong. I still can't help but wonder if that man really bought those clothes for himself, or if he had a much more terrifying purpose in mind. My name is Tyler. I was born in Washington, and I still live here today. There's a very deep scar on my right shoulder. Every time I look at it, I am reminded of the story that changed my life forever. It happened almost 10 years ago. Back then, I was a young guy who loved a free, easygoing, and somewhat reckless lifestyle. On my 23rd birthday, I decided to try something I had been curious about for a long time: marijuana. After that, I started using it regularly. Of course, I always kept it within the legal limits. I was also very open to casual relationships. I threw myself into parties and constantly used Tinder to hook up with strangers because I loved the thrill of meeting someone new. Then one day, I swiped right on Janet. Unlike the young, wild girls I usually met, Janet had a completely different vibe. She was 35, divorced, and raising a 4-year-old son on her own. Her bio sounded very honest and mature. That maturity didn't scare me off. Instead, it sparked my curiosity. I found it exciting because I had never had an experience with an older woman who had been married. Our texts flowed perfectly. Talking to Janet every day quickly became an essential habit for me. The real turning point in our connection was when Janet revealed that she also used weed regularly to cope with life's pressures. I can't even describe how excited I was. I immediately thought she was my true soulmate. I tried to ask Janet out a few times, but she always turned me down, saying she was too busy taking care of her little boy. Then, one weekend, she surprisingly messaged me first and invited me over to her place. She told me her ex-husband had picked up their son for the weekend, so the house would be completely quiet and private. I was beside myself with excitement. I got everything ready and made sure to bring some of my own stash to make the night even better. Janet's house was located in a quiet neighborhood. The inside was pretty cozy, though it was a little messy with children's toys scattered around. Meeting her in person, I noticed she looked much thinner and more exhausted than she did in her Tinder pictures. We sat and talked for a while. Everything was going great, and then we moved on to the main event. The room slowly filled with the scent of smoke, and we both drifted into a hazy high. A little later, Janet stood up and walked out of the room without saying a word. Since I was riding the high, I didn't pay much attention. A few minutes later, she came back, leaned in close, and started stroking my face, neck, and chest. I figured she wanted to hook up just as much as I did, so I completely relaxed. When I tried to take the lead and leaned in to kiss her, she instantly pulled away. I asked her if she was okay, but she just stared at me in absolute silence. Janet's eyes suddenly changed. The dreamy look from before was completely gone, replaced by an intense, confusing rage. She glared at me for a few seconds, and then suddenly screamed, "Give him back to me!" Before I could even process what was happening, she lunged at me. A sharp, blinding pain ripped through my right shoulder, snapping me out of my high instantly. I shrieked in pain and shock as warm blood began pouring down my shoulder. That was when I realized Janet was clutching a pencil in her hand. Janet had turned into a completely different person. Her face was twisted with rage. Her eyes rolled back, showing only the whites, and she raised the pencil again, frantically trying to stab my neck. She kept muttering wild, meaningless words. My survival instinct kicked in. I used my left hand to block her arm and used all my strength to tackle her to the floor. I yanked the pencil out of her grip, threw it across the room, and slapped her hard across the face to snap her out of it. While she lay on the floor dazed, I clutched my bleeding shoulder and stumbled out the front door. With the last bit of strength, I yelled to the neighbors for help, asking them to call 911. A short while later, the police and an ambulance swarmed the scene. The officers restrained Janet and put her in handcuffs while she was in a state of total mental collapse. I was rushed straight to the hospital and got patched up, having lost a significant amount of blood. After the investigation, the police told me the truth behind the incident, and it left me completely stunned. The 4-year-old son Janet kept talking about on Tinder had actually died in a horrific car accident a month before she even met me. Unable to accept reality, Janet had completely isolated herself from the world, drowning in grief and turning to weed and other substances to numb her pain. According to the police report, using a high dose of marijuana that night, combined with her severe, long-term trauma, triggered an extreme episode of paranoia in her brain. In her drug-induced state, she looked at me, but hallucinated the person who had taken her child away. This led to her violent, uncontrollable outburst to get her son back. The court later found Janet not criminally responsible due to her mental state, and she was sent to a state psychiatric hospital for treatment. I never saw her again. I will never forget the madness in Janet's eyes that night, but I don't blame her. As I've grown older, I understand that it all came from the unbearable pain of losing the most precious thing in her life. I almost died on a blind date with a stranger. My name is Betty. This happened a year ago when I matched with a guy named Nathan on Tinder. After nearly a month of texting back and forth, realizing we had the exact same vibe, we decided to have our first date at a downtown bar. I already had a huge crush on him, so I was incredibly excited. When we finally met, I was completely shocked by Nathan's appearance. He was way better looking than his Tinder photos, even though his profile pictures were already amazing. Nathan had a slightly rugged, edgy look. His buzz cut and his heavily tattooed arms were the things that impressed me the most. Everything about him added up to the exact description of my dream guy. 3 hours of drinking and talking passed in the blink of an eye, because I was totally captivated by his every gesture and word. I really felt a spark on our very first date, and looking into Nathan's eyes, I had a strong feeling that he felt the same way. After a few flirty jokes, we decided to leave the bar to find a more private spot to continue the evening. Nathan drove me to a pretty deserted area on the edge of the city and pulled over. In the cramped space of the car, we looked at each other and shared a sweet first kiss. That was the last good moment of the night. While we were both caught up in the romantic haze, a loud crash suddenly echoed. A massive impact slammed straight into the back of our car, almost throwing us forward. Before I could even process what was happening, Nathan whipped his head around to look at the rearview mirror and cursed angrily. But instead of getting out to check the damage, he immediately threw the car into gear, slammed his foot on the gas pedal, and sped away. Terrified, I looked out the back window. A black pickup truck was also speeding up, tailing us closely. I kept asking Nathan what was going on, but he didn't answer. He just focused entirely on driving. A moment later, on top of the roaring engines, a series of deafening explosions started ringing out from behind us. I glanced in the mirror and my blood ran cold when I saw at least 3 men in the pickup truck. One was driving, while the other 2 leaned halfway out of the windows, repeatedly firing guns at our car. I was so scared I could barely breathe. My eyes were glued to the rearview mirror, while Nathan constantly swerved and maneuvered the car to dodge the bullets. At that moment, I truly believed I was going to die. If I didn't get shot to death, I figured I would die in a car crash or have a heart attack. Eventually, the pickup truck managed to pull up right alongside us. The gunfire temporarily stopped, and I could hear the men over there screaming at the top of their lungs. "Pull over, Nathan! You're a dead man, motherfucker!" Nathan called them bastards. He kept swerving to block the road, refusing to give the pickup truck a single chance to pass us. I squeezed my eyes shut in terror, gripped the handle tightly, and couldn't stop crying. The car rocked violently. The screech of grinding metal was piercingly loud as the pickup truck kept ramming into us, trying to force us off the road to get ahead. All I could do was grit my teeth and bear it. Then, a deafening blast went off right next to my ear. When I opened my eyes, I froze in absolute horror. A bullet was lodged right in the door on my side of the car. If it had been just a tiny bit off, it would have gone straight through my head. After about 20 minutes that felt like an entire century, the pickup truck finally slowed down, turned onto another road, and disappeared. Even so, Nathan didn't slow down at all. He kept flying at a high speed until we were deep into the downtown area. He pulled over to the curb, and both of us sat in total silence for a long time. I was still in deep shock. My legs were like jelly from the fear, so much so that I could only sit motionless in the passenger seat. Nathan turned to look at me. His face was stone cold. He lowered his voice, speaking in a dead, serious tone, emphasizing every single word. "Get out of the car and listen carefully. Do not talk to the police about tonight. The best thing you can do is forget everything that happened and don't try to find out anything about me if you want to stay alive." Nathan got out of the car first. Right at that moment, a taxi happened to drive by. He signaled for the cab to stop and told me to get in. I clumsily scrambled out of his car and lunged toward the waiting taxi. Right before I shut the door, Nathan looked at me one last time and said shortly, "Nice meeting you." I didn't answer. I got into the taxi and went straight home. I stayed awake almost the entire night trying to calm down. My mind was spinning with a million questions about who Nathan really was. Finally, I decided to text him to demand an explanation for everything. But Nathan's Tinder account had already vanished. Even now, a year later, I am still psychologically scarred by that horrific dating experience, and I haven't been able to truly open my heart to anyone else. I don't know who Nathan really was, but to be honest, alongside the lingering fear, there's still a small, faint trace of regret left inside me.
My name is Tessa. It all started this past March. My washing machine completely died after 7 years of faithful service. I sat there looking at the dirty clothes piled up in the hamper and calculated all the expenses I needed to cover. I sighed and walked back to the living room. I called my best friend to complain, and she suggested I look for a used washing machine on Craigslist to save money. She had bought a fridge that way a few years ago, and it was still running fine. That evening, after reconsidering my budget, I decided to take my friend's advice. I downloaded the Craigslist app and scrolled through dozens of posts. Most were for old, rusty machines, or the price was way out of my budget. I kept searching patiently and found one that looked pretty new. The photos were clear. The asking price was quite reasonable. The description said they needed to sell it fast because they were moving quickly. I immediately messaged the poster, whose account was named Dave. He replied in a few minutes. According to the information he sent, the washer was almost 2 years old and still had a warranty until August. We messaged back and forth on Craigslist for a while, and he was quite patient in answering my questions. Dave even enthusiastically sent a few more photos of the washing machine. Regarding delivery, Dave said he was in Seattle visiting his mom, but could have his friend drop the machine off to me if I wired the money first. For that price and Dave's enthusiasm, I decisively transferred the money right away. The machine was delivered the next afternoon by 2 men. There was no setup required, so they placed it where I asked and left. I didn't have time to ask many questions. When I plugged it in and turned it on, the control panel lit up. I put clothes in and hit the start button, but the machine stayed still. I tried again, and the situation was the same. I checked the power source, looked at the user manual, and still no luck. I started to feel uneasy. I opened the app to message Dave, but his account now showed as non-existent. A message to the phone number I had used earlier reported it as unavailable. I sank down to the floor, thinking about the money I had lost, and immediately wanted to cry. The next day, I went to the police station to file a report. The officer said they would create a file, but fraud cases like this take a long time to investigate. They might not even get a result. I left in a daze, clutching the crime report receipt. In the car, I reopened the Craigslist app, searching similar keywords. All the posts with the same photo style and similar writing tone, I left comments warning that this was a scam account. Very quickly, the posts with my comments disappeared. I kept reporting dozens of listings like this. I had to make these scammers pay. That evening, my Craigslist account started receiving abusive messages. I knew immediately it was one of the scam accounts I had reported. I instantly blocked it. The next message didn't come on Craigslist, but on my phone. You don't know who you're messing with. Stop before you regret it. I blocked that number too, then actively continued searching for posts and reporting them, ignoring dinner. Did he really think he could scare me? Then came the third message, with details about where I worked, the car I drove, and the coffee shop I usually stopped at in the morning. This time my hands were shaking slightly. He was right about everything. I called the police again. They advised me to stop leaving comments. The threatening messages weren't enough for them to intervene strongly. I thought I would stop. But when I looked at the useless washing machine in the corner and the money that had disappeared, anger flared up again. I wrote a long post detailing how I was scammed, attaching screenshots of the conversations and photos of the broken machine. The next day, my phone rang non-stop. A lot of people called asking about a free washing machine, which confused me. Searching online, I was surprised to see a post promising a free washing machine and listing my phone number. Before the calls even stopped, a few people came knocking on my apartment door. I had to tape a note to the door saying there was no free washing machine. and that it was a malicious prank. I called the police again and turned off my phone for the whole day. That evening, I was about to go to sleep when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw a tall, big man. "Who is it?" I asked, not unlocking the door. "Hi. Did you post the ad?" My heart pounded. "I didn't post anything. You have the wrong place. The internet says you want to have a good time tonight." The address was clear. I was shocked and immediately yelled for him to leave. He stood still for a few seconds, muttered a curse, and turned around. I trembled, checked the lock again, and went into the bedroom. My phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number asking if I liked the gift. "This is just the beginning. Stop your stupid actions, or more men will be knocking on your door." The final message was like a match lighting my horror. It clearly listed all my personal information and accurately described the clothes I was wearing. My heart was pounding very hard now, and my hands and feet were ice cold. Did I really provoke a maniac? What else did he know about me? I fearfully locked the bedroom door, closed all the curtains, and hid under the blanket. After calming down a little, I typed a reply saying he won. I would stop. I begged him not to do anything else, and that I just wanted to live normally. I deleted all my posts, left the buy-sell groups, and changed my phone number. For 2 weeks, I lived in fear and high alertness. I constantly felt someone was watching me, checked the door many times every night, looked over my shoulder every time I walked, and parked in a different spot every day. Fortunately, nothing else happened. I got rid of the old washing machine and bought a new one from an appliance store on a payment plan. I reported the entire incident to the police and am still waiting for the results of the investigation. Honestly, I don't expect to get the money back anymore. I just want my life to return to peace. Sometimes I still think about the person who scammed me, the person who turned me into a prey in my own home. He's still out there, doing the same thing to others, but I can't do anything. All I know is to lock my door tightly every night and never buy anything online again. I am Brian, an ordinary office worker living alone in a small apartment on the outskirts of Minnesota. My apartment is on the second floor of an old apartment building. It's nothing special, but it provides comfort after long, tiring work hours. My life was very peaceful until a week ago, when an event changed everything. That day, I came home after work, hoping to relax in front of the TV, watch my favorite show, and have some snacks. It was the time of day I looked forward to the most, but the first thing I saw was the front door forced open, the hinge almost completely broken. My apartment was in chaos. The most valuable items were gone, including my favorite TV. I sat down heavily on the chair, overwhelmed with shock and anger. I had worked hard to buy those things, and now they were gone, as if they had never existed. I immediately called the police and reported the incident. They came, took notes, and advised me that the chances of recovering my belongings were very low. I feel powerless, but try to accept reality. I didn't want the house to remain empty, so I decided to buy a new TV. I turned to Craigslist, where I used to shop for cheap second-hand items. I spent the whole evening scrolling through a series of posts until an ad made me stop. The TV being sold was identical to the one I had just lost, from the size, brand, to the small scratch on the bottom right corner. What was even stranger was that the price was very low and the address was not far from where I live. A strange feeling arose in me, half doubt, half curiosity. The next morning, I contacted the seller and arranged to meet. The house was located in a remote area, with only a few scattered houses around, and the rest was forest. A cold atmosphere enveloped the area, and sunlight struggled to penetrate through the dense tree canopy. When I arrived, A man in his 40s opened the door. He was tall and thin, with messy hair, and his sharp eyes stared at me as if assessing every movement. I stepped in, and the TV was placed right in the middle of the living room. My heart raced as I noticed the distinctive scratch on the corner of the TV. It was exactly mine. I tried to remain calm, pretending to examine it. He took me on a tour of the house, pointing out a few other items he wanted to sell, but the more I looked, the more stunned I became. The black Bluetooth speaker, the antique clock, and even my collection of movie DVDs were all there. I felt a surge of anger, but unease held back my impulse. I made an excuse to leave, but just as I was about to head for the door, the man suddenly stood in my way. He pulled a gun from his belt, his cold eyes seeming to pierce through me. He snarled a warning not to come back or tell anyone what I had seen. My whole body froze, and cold sweat poured down. I nodded, trying to leave without showing the fear that was drowning me. Once home, I immediately called the police. I told them everything, but they said they needed more time to gather evidence before executing a search warrant. I spent the whole day worried, not taking my eyes off the window and checking the door latch multiple times. The feeling of being threatened haunted me, but there was nothing I could do except wait. That night, the silence was so deep that I could hear the wind whistling through the crack in the door. Suddenly, a strange sound came from the kitchen window. I turned off the lights, tried to stay silent, and moved toward the source of the sound. In the dim light from the street lamp, I saw a figure trying to pry open the window. It was the man who sold the TV. In his hand gleamed the steel of a large knife. My heart was pounding, and my body felt frozen. I quickly hid behind the sofa and pulled out my phone to call 911. My voice trembled as I tried to stay calm, not wanting to be detected. Meanwhile, the sound of breaking glass echoed. He had entered the house. I could hear his heavy footsteps getting closer, each step pounding like a blow to my chest. The sound of the knife scraping against the glass table echoed, screeching in a chilling manner. I held my breath, not daring to move, but just at that moment, the sound of police sirens echoed outside. The man panicked, turning and running toward the window. But as soon as he jumped into the yard, the police had surrounded him. I collapsed, my whole body trembling uncontrollably. The police reassured me and led me out of the house. The man was handcuffed, his eyes filled with rage and madness. Even so, I felt a sense of relief knowing that he would no longer have the chance to threaten me or anyone else. The next day, I received a notification from the police that they had found all the stolen items in his house, including my TV. I breathed a sigh of relief, but that terrible night haunted me forever. Since then, I have never dared to use Craigslist again and always remind myself that safety is more important than any item.
I am Julia, 24 years old, living alone in a small apartment in a quiet suburban area. As someone who lives quite frugally, I often use Craigslist to buy and sell secondhand items. Sometimes, I read the missed connections section, where people write about fleeting moments with someone they missed the chance to connect with. I see it as an interesting way to kill time, reading strange or sometimes funny stories. One evening, while scrolling through missed connections, a post caught my eye. The headline was simple yet bizarre. The girl in the red coat at the supermarket near Elm Street. The post described a brown-haired girl with a ponytail, buying fruits and canned goods, exactly like what I had done that day. I felt a slight chill, but quickly brushed it off. It was probably just a coincidence, and I wasn't the only one with such appearance or habits. A few days later, I needed to buy some more items, so I went back to the familiar supermarket. The atmosphere in the supermarket was as usual, busy but not too crowded. I pushed the shopping cart through the aisles, picking out groceries, but throughout that time, I had the feeling that someone was watching me. When I turned around, I caught the gaze of a man standing a few meters away from me. He was thin, wearing a black hoodie with a pale face, deep-set eyes, and tightly pressed lips. He stood motionless, staring at me intently, as if he wanted to engrave my image into his mind.
I pretended not to notice and quickly moved to another area, but every time I looked up, I saw him appearing nearby, always maintaining just enough distance to avoid being too obvious. A sense of fear began to creep in, and I decided to finish my shopping, pushing the cart faster and heading to the checkout. Once I reached the parking lot, the biting cold of the evening made me shiver slightly. As I was putting the bags in the trunk, I saw him again, standing near the exit of the parking lot, his eyes still fixed on me. I hurried into the car, locked the doors, and drove home. In my mind, I tried to reassure myself that he was probably just a strange person, and there was no need to overthink it. That night, as I sat on the bed, I opened Craigslist again, out of habit. This time, a new post appeared in the missed connection section. The headline made my blood run cold. The girl who left the supermarket tonight, driving the silver car. I nearly dropped my phone as I read the content of the post. He described exactly what I was wearing, how I looked around anxiously, and even wrote, "I want to be with you. Just give me a chance." I couldn't believe my eyes. My whole body trembled, not knowing what to do. I thought about calling the police, but with just this evidence, it wouldn't be convincing enough. I decided to reply to the post, asking him to stop and warning that I would call the police if he continued. But deep down, I was worried that doing this might only make things worse. A few days later, everything calmed down. I didn't receive any further responses to my post. I began to think that maybe he had given up, but that peace was only temporary. One night, while watching TV in the living room, my phone vibrated with a new email notification. I opened it and almost dropped my phone. Attached to the email was a photo taken from outside the window, a picture of me sitting on the sofa. My heart was pounding and cold sweat poured over me. I rushed to check all the windows and the front door, making sure they were locked. But before I could do anything else, a loud noise echoed from the living room window. The glass shattered, and a hand reached through, forcefully pulling the door open. I screamed in fear, ran to the bedroom, locked the door tightly, and called 911 in a panic. Police sirens echoed not long after. I heard the sound of footsteps running, and then everything became silent. When the police broke down the door, they announced that the intruder had escaped. I sat huddled on the bed, my whole body trembling, tears streaming down my face. The police found a sharp knife and several pieces of paper with scrawled writing left near the window. They were lines expressing his obsession with me. I couldn't stay in that house for another minute. The next day, I packed my things and moved in temporarily with a close friend in another city. But even after leaving that place, the feeling of being watched still haunted me. I always felt like someone was watching me from the shadows. Every time I heard footsteps behind me or saw a car slow down near me, I would jump and turn around, my heart racing. I deleted the Craigslist app and promised myself I would never open it again. This story is not only a warning about the hidden dangers online, but also a haunting that will forever be etched in my mind. I'm not sure I will ever feel safe again, no matter where I am.